You know, there are places you avoid because they're scary. Dark alleyways, abandoned buildings, stretches of road you don't stop at night. These places tend to invoke that fear that keeps us away from them. We typically tend to stay away from them out of instinct. Rarely do we see these places and it grabs our attention, and even if it does, we sensible people tend to stay away from them. Respect that distance. But what happens when you don't? What happens when you take its existence as a personal slight? Today's story is something like that, and it all began with going somewhere they weren't supposed to go. The events of the story took place in a village. There's a banyan tree in the outskirts of this village, a very special tree. A long time ago, it was a place of worship, and people used to go there to offer tributes for protection. Now, as to tribute to whom? Well, they say that banyan trees are a place for spirits. It used to matter once, but now it's deserted and forgotten. People don't go there anymore, and it remains as a monument of time past. By the time these events began, the tree existed only as a memory, something the elders mentioned in passing and something children took as bedtime story. People usually avoid that area out of respect, but Rishabh took it as a sign of fear. The incident takes place in the village of Gujarat and is sent to me by an anonymous viewer. They wanted me to keep the names and locations private, so I won't be disclosing the true names. The story starts in the warm autumn of October. It's holiday season and people are returning homes or visiting relatives. Rishabh was the same, he was visiting his cousin. Saurav, his cousin, was born in this village and Rishabh was from the city. They were both in their late 20s, were educated and loud, especially Rishabh. His parents used to be from this village but had moved away to the city, and Rishabh grew up hearing the stories from the village, the story of the banyan tree included, and Rishabh grew older laughing at them. He thought that the belief of the villagers were silly and pretty much born out of fear. And Rishabh firmly believed in overcoming their fears. A noble sentiment, but perhaps not in this case. So coming back to the village, it's October, it's festive season, people are celebrating and things look happy. But what's common when it's festive season and you have a group of young men who think they're hotcakes? Party, of course. So that night they drank. They drank and laughed. The laughter carried itself farther than it should, and this went on past midnight. The night was beautiful and the moon was out, so they went for a walk to cool off and enjoy the night. You know, a typical party night. You drink, you laugh, and then you go out for a walk with your friends and enjoy the breeze. Same was with them. And somehow they found their way towards the banyan tree. It stood there in that dim moonlight, steady as a monolith. They hadn't noticed it yet. Their conversations were light and jokes were being thrown around, and somehow Rishabh's eyes found that direction, the banyan. To Rishabh, it looked pretty, the way you'd find a lone, warm house in the middle of the woods. Pretty. One of the boys, Rohan, saw his gaze moving towards the tree and he knew that Rishabh was a little wild when it came to stuff like that, so he wanted to stop him before it's too late. You know, we should go back. It's late. His voice was surprisingly firm. What are you talking about, dude? We just got here. Come on, don't spoil the mood, okay? Arun chimed in. I don't think we should be here. If you guys want to have fun, let's just go somewhere else, alright? Why? What's wrong with this place? Rishabh asked. Doesn't matter. I'm just not feeling too great, okay? Can we just go? Rohan insisted on leaving. Why? You're scared that there are ghosts here? You believe those stories? Stories? No. But I've seen what happened to Mohit. Saurav's ears perked up. He had heard that story. That Mohit? The one that died because of a liver disease? It wasn't a liver disease. What do you mean? It was something they couldn't cure. Do you know how he got it? It's because of that tree right there. One night he got drunk and got wasted under it. A few days later he developed a strange disease. Then he died. The villagers say that the tree took him. Going there at night is not a good idea. Rishabh laughed at Rohan. You're telling me you're scared of a tree? Man, you need to grow up, alright? There is no such thing as ghosts. It's all just stories, fairy tales, pixie dust. It doesn't exist, okay? Then he turned towards the tree and started walking. Wait, where are you going? Sort of called from the back. To prove a point, he heard Rishabh. At this point, Rishabh was making a choice. The choice where he'd prove all of them wrong. Or so he thought. Reaching the tree, he started to curse it. Expletives of all sorts were thrown. The others tried to stop him. Even if their belief wasn't firm, they still respected it. But drunk and arrogant Rishabh just wouldn't stop. And then he urinated on the banyan tree and kept cursing while doing it. Dared it to respond. This was crossing the line. Even Saurav agreed. That act was enough to ruin the mood of everyone, so they all left for their homes. Saurav also mentioned that when they were returning home from the banyan, everything was normal, like nothing really happened. But when he recalled more carefully, he realized that they started to feel a little bit more chilly, a bit more cold. That night passed quietly. Nothing really happened. There was nothing dramatic that was going on. And everyone thought that that's it, like nothing's gonna happen. There was no ghost, no spirit, no nothing, no curse. It wasn't until Rishabh returned back to the city that strange things began to happen to him. He started to have more night terrors, and eventually it escalated to sleep paralysis. His parents used to report that he used to point at corners and just be terrified, as if something there was scaring him to no end. They used to hear screams coming from his room at night, but when they rushed in to check on him, he was always found sleeping, and it became a regular thing. Then, physical things started to happen. His limbs began to weaken and shut down. One by one, all his limbs stopped working. Then, it got even worse. He stopped eating, he couldn't go out, and he was completely bedridden. His family took him to the hospital, from one doctor to the other, running from one referral to the other. Loads of tests were done, and the report came that it was a liver disease, but no treatment worked on him. And day by day, his situation got worse and worse. In the meanwhile, back in the village, there was a death. And the one who passed away was Rohan. Yes, the guy that was actively against Rishabh died first. The entire village was in shock. A healthy young man in the prime of his youth passed away just like that. Before he passed away, his parents reported that he had similar symptoms, seeing shadows in the corners, feeling chill, the limbs began to stop working, and when taken to a hospital and the tests were done, his results came back as liver disease as well. Again, no treatment worked with him as well. According to the doctors, it was untreatable. Pathology suggested long periods of alcohol overconsumption. But these boys didn't drink that heavily. Sure, they had one drink once in a while, but this kind of sickness doesn't come from occasional drinking. So what exactly was going on? Another fact to notice was that 3 of the 4 boys from the village got the liver disease, but one was different. Rahul was different. His lungs had started to fail. This one didn't drink, but he smoked. And when Rishabh was doing all those things that night, he was smoking. The villagers had no clue as to what's happening. Neither did their families. The boys had yet to confess, and when they finally confessed, it was too late for Rohan, and for them as well. Even after finding out what was wrong with them, their families were helpless. By the end of the month, each one of them had started to die off one by one. Arun died the same way Rohan did, but Harsh's death was particularly gruesome. I won't go into the details, but he was found impaled in a rebar by a construction site. Some witnesses say that he went out screaming of his house in a panic, and by the time his family caught up to him, he was already gone. 3 funerals were held in that village, each of a boy in the prime of his youth. In the end, the last one alive was Saurav. With his family realizing that things were getting out of hand, they decided to get some help. A Bhagat was called. A Bhagat is a person that usually does things like aura cleansing and minor exorcisms. He tried to contact the entity and to find out what it wants. He failed. badly. Not only did he could not negotiate with the entity, but he was seen running in the streets, screaming, running away from Saurav's home. One thing was clear to all. This problem wasn't going to go away easy. Knowing this, they looked for a more expert help. They looked for a tantric. Saurav at that time was completely bedridden. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't walk. All he could do was just lay in his bed. His weight had dropped from 150 pounds to 95 pounds in just 2 weeks. That day, the tantric was called and he sat in the courtyard. Saurav was brought out on a bed in front of that tantric. The tantric took one look at him and then he got up and sat on the ground. There he began to draw a circle with some white-looking powder. They couldn't identify what it actually was, but they just kept watching. After drawing that circle, he then started to make another figure. It looked like a mandala. Then he started to put some stuff inside that mandala. Some things that they could recognize and some that they had never seen before. And to the shock of his family members, Saurav got up and sat on the bed. A person who was bedridden for days suddenly moved. Then the tantric started to chant. As soon as it started, Saurav got out of his bed, walked, and went and sat inside that circle. The chanting kept going and Saurav began to tremble, and soon he started to throw his head around. If you see someone throwing their head around, it might not be that person that's controlling his own body. It could be an entity.
Out, upara, upara, abhiya, abhiya.
The tantric shouted. Saurav's movements became even more intense. Then, a laugh.
You think you can take me out?
Saurav spoke, but his voice was changed. The tantric continued with his questioning of that entity, but it remained stubborn as a mule. The tantric understood. This entity wasn't gonna be easy. And after 30 minutes of conversation with it, he finally offered a negotiation.
What will it take for you to leave this boy alone? Place? Tribute? What?
The entity refused.
Respect was taken. You think these brats can just stroll into my house and piss on my doorstep? Do you think this can be brought with offerings? A place? I'm not leaving until I get all of them, including this boy.
This was personal. It wasn't some evoked ritual gone wrong. This was about ego and respect, and that entity would not leave until it feels that respect was earned back. It was hell-bent on taking Saurav and wasn't gonna leave without him.
What will it take you to leave? Money? Women? Power? I'll give you all of it. Just give me this brat.
The tantric realized that there was no other way than using force on this one. He concluded the ritual there. Talking to his family, he explained that he'll be coming back in 3 days, but in that 3 days, that they need to prepare some ingredients. Those 3 days were nothing short of hell for Saurav. He was already unable to get off of bed, and now the nightmares had become even more intense, even more common. During the daytime, he was unconscious, and during the night, he was plagued with nightmares. On his family's side, those that had went to gather the materials for that ritual started to face some problems. A few of the local boys from the community who had gone to buy the ingredient faced an accident. It was a minor one, but it was strange, as in they didn't crash into another car. Their tires slipped while driving. Sure, they may have slipped on some debris, right? But the road was clean, just asphalt. No gravel, no debris, no nothing. It wasn't raining, so there was no chance for water slipping either. So how did they crash? Strange. Unexpected events started to happen left and right. More events like not being able to find some ingredients, the stores that kept them were out of stock, things of that nature continued happening. It was as if something didn't want them to succeed, coupled with the month of suffering and small things that started to hurt badly, but somehow they pulled through. There was one more thing that the tantric asked for, and it was a piece of land. Nothing huge, just a 4 feet by 4 feet patch of land somewhere where people would be less likely to go to. Saurav's family agreed to give a place by their fields. 3 days later, the tantric returned, and it became clear why he wanted those things. He wanted to perform a binding ritual. And in the hindsight, there wasn't much he could do other than that either. But first, he had to get that entity out of Saurav's body. The entity was invoked again, but this time it was more fierce, more terrifying. But this time the tantric had came prepared. In those 3 days he took, the tantric had performed intense practices, evoking deities that would help him fight that entity. In short, he was preparing an army. So this time when the entity found itself in that circle again, it was on its guards. He initiated that negotiation again, but this time he had an upper hand. Finally, after 30 to 40 minutes of negotiation, that entity cracked. Then it asked for some offerings: 10 pounds of sweets, a bucket of milk with sugar, and raw meat. When these things were placed in front of that entity who was still inside Saurav, it began to eat, and it ate through Saurav. A human being eating 15 pounds of sweet, a whole bucket of milk, and eating more than 5 pounds of just raw meat. Yeah, disturbing. Disturbing on a whole another level. Those that were watching that ritual happen were shocked out of their minds. Finally, when it finished everything, it was then given an oath that he'd be transferred into an object, and then that object was buried in that 4x4 patch of land, and a shrine-like monument was built on top of that. The ritual was successful. The shrine still exists. To this day, it is deserted. Nobody dares to go there. Saurav's family still owns that land. After getting a little better, Saurav got to know that Rishabh, his cousin, had also passed away, and he went in 3 days after the night he did those things. So yeah, he passed away first. As for why Rohan was the first to pass away from his village, Saurav asked that question to himself every single day. The entity wasn't destroyed, but it was contained. The Banyan still stands, still under the moonlight. So my advice to you, if someone asks you to respect a place, do it, even if you don't believe in it, even if it's just a tree. Who knows what it's hiding in its branches? I'm Vivek and you're watching Graveline Stories. Leave a like if you enjoyed the story and subscribe if you want more stories like these. This is an incident where the provocation was intentional, but for the one where it wasn't intentional, you can watch this video right here. And I'll see you there. Till the next time.